So he's been on the streets of Hong Kong and he joins us live now. Hedley, welcome to the program.
Hi, Shari. Thanks very much for having me.
Now, there have been 5 months of unrest, of course, and as you would have just heard me say, we've been presented with what you have described in some of your reporting as a false narrative. Why is this the case?
Shari, I think that what we've seen over the last few months has been a very dramatic and quite aggressive escalation of protest action, where once there were peaceful protests and peaceful marches by many hundreds of thousands of Hong Kong people, these have morphed into extremely violent, very aggressive attacks on ordinary citizens of Hong Kong, on police stations. There has been wanton vandalism and production lines of petrol bombs, thousands of petrol bombs produced at universities, Chinese University and the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. Molotov cocktails being hurled into trains. Incredible disruption to people's lives, all in the name of democracy. And it's very difficult for many Hong Kong people now to reconcile a democracy movement that is just so brutally violent towards police, towards citizens who disagree with them. And this has changed the nature of this story. It has, I think, taken a while for people, particularly a number of the media outlets that have been covering this, it's taken a while to reconcile what's gone on here and how the legitimacy of the protest movement has been completely undermined by their resort to violence.
And Hedley, it's been so violent that even Vision has emerged this week of pro-democracy protesters trying to burn alive a man, and they actually set him alight. And we can show some of that vision on screen, but we can't show all of it because it's simply too graphic. And the reason they set this man alight was because he simply said that we are all Chinese, and he disagreed, he objected to their brand of vandalism. And this just happened a few days ago, but it's barely had any mainstream coverage.
That's right. This 57-year-old man, a Hong Kong man, he saw a group of masked, black-clad protesters, part of the so-called democracy movement, and they were vandalising the train station at Ma On Shan, just on the other side of the mountain where I used to live when I worked in Hong Kong. And he told them to stop damaging the public property. They abused him, he chased after them, they then stopped, beat him up, and surrounded by other commuters, he said that he just wanted them to not be vandals, and he said, we're all Chinese. So for his trouble, he was doused with lighter fluid and then set alight, and now he has 50% burns to his body, upper body and head. He may still die because of the ingestion of the lighter fluid and the fumes and the burning to his organs internally. And it has been such a horrific thing. But there have been, I think, very deliberate attempts in the propaganda of the democracy movement to try to pretend that they weren't responsible for this. They're blaming the police. They say the police did it as part of an elaborate stunt, or it was Beijing. They won't take responsibility for the extraordinary attempted murder of a civilian man. Now, this is at the very far end of the spectrum. This is a very unusual event, but it's still shocking. And I think it's disappointing that media outlets aren't showing this footage, because it does demonstrate, does show the other side of this story, and why Hong Kong police are at their wits' end, because they have also been besieged and petrol bombed in the married quarters where they live with their families. This has been going on for weeks, months, and they've come under a relentless attack. The police are in turn accused of brutality against the protesters. And I think that after months of severe property damage and all of the accompanying protests and lashing out at police, there will undoubtedly be cases of police retaliating, but not to the extent that we have seen from the protesters. And this part of the story has gone, I think, unreported or underreported.
What about the response from our politicians? We've had the US pass legislation by Congress and supported by the President Donald Trump that actually supports the Hong Kong protesters and China's threatened retaliation in response to this. Our Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, was pushed in an interview on radio this morning with Neil Mitchell on whether he's going to follow a similar move. He was quite firm in his position that he's not going to intervene. Let's just have a quick listen to what he had to say this morning on 3AW.
We've been urging restraint and patience, and at the end of the day, it's a matter for the Hong Kong administration to deal with the civil issues there. Our interventions, sort of overt or otherwise, don't necessarily help that situation, and so we still maintain hope for some sort of peaceful resolution. But for the people of Hong Kong, this is very, very difficult. I know there are a lot of Australians who are very concerned about that, and so am I, and the Foreign Minister.
You don't think you think the US involvement won't help?
Well, the exercise here is to ensure that you can restore order on the ground with the civil authorities in Hong Kong. I mean, in the same way, if there are massive protests in any other country, it's their country's responsibility to sort that out. And
yeah, but the US is willing to take. The US is willing to take a stand. Why aren't we?
Well, we have taken a very strong position in terms of how we would like to see this resolved.
It seems, Hedley, like Scott Morrison is taking a more nuanced view on the crisis, certainly more than the US. But how does this situation get resolved? The protesters are demanding for some royal commission into the police brutality, and there's, a new police commissioner has been appointed, but the government, Carrie Lam, doesn't seem to be giving in at all, or even a bit.
Yeah. And I think that the nuanced view of Prime Minister Scott Morrison will be in part because he will be getting reports from Hong Kong about the extreme violence being being initiated by the protesters. I mean, there are senior lawyers up here who liken this, in fact say it actually does tick all the boxes of domestic terrorism. And that's because you have people who are taking the law into their own hands and making demands on the government while trying to blow up public buildings, private property, and murder police doing their jobs, trying to protect this property and protect the population. So Hong Kong's the meat and the sandwich in the trade war between China and the United States. And it's a depressing fact that if you are upset and accuse the protesters of going way too far, of forfeiting their legitimacy in their actions, you are accused then of being a running dog for China and for the Chinese Communist Party. But for the United States and the Senate, leveraging against China by interfering in Hong Kong in this way is an opportunity too good to miss, and that's why they're doing it.
So what's the end in sight, or is there an end in sight, Hedley? Do you think Hong Kong should have some sort of amnesty, or does this just go on for months and months?
Yeah, well, I've been talking to senior government and former government officials and private senior business people in Hong Kong about this and getting their best views on how the stability may be restored, how a place, a once very peaceful city of 7.5 million people can return to normal, if that's even possible, given the king hit to the economy and the cash and the business that's fled Hong Kong. And two themes keep coming up. One, the Chief Executive, Carrie Lam, who has been so inept in her management of the government and so arrogant and blinkered in her belief that she could ram through this extradition bill earlier this year and then persist with it after the first peaceful marches. She has to go. Timing for that, I think, is a matter of conjecture, because they won't want to be seen to be giving in to the mob the mob that has trashed the universities, destroyed public infrastructure, tried to murder civilians and police. So they'll want to ensure that she makes an exit at a time where it can't be said that she has been forced out by extreme violent acts. The other thing that keeps coming up is the need for a public inquiry into what has gone on. Now, the protesters, the rioters, in many cases recently, who are among the protesters, they want to see their acts excused. They want exoneration. They don't believe they should be held accountable for their conduct because they face 10 years imprisonment for rioting. But they want the police to be subjected to a commission of inquiry. The compromise may well be another form of inquiry that deals with the causes of this, the wealth gap, the concerns that many Hong Kong people have that they're losing economic leverage to mainland Chinese who are coming in, they're losing opportunities, and they have worries about their future 22 years after the handover of the former British colony. So an inquiry into the allegations that have been levelled against the police, and also the rioting and the responses of various people to it are essential. Most countries and cities conduct a public inquiry after a major crisis, and Hong Kong would find it, I think, a helpful, constructive thing to do, and it would be a circuit breaker for these current troubles. At the moment, there's a calm. There are district elections on Sunday, and I think that the protest movement has decided that they will be as well behaved as possible going into those, and then hopefully they will see their side receive a significant vote, and then perhaps that will also be another reason why for calm to continue. But it's still very fluid and you know, unpredictable.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Hedley. Really appreciate your time tonight, and also look forward to, you've done a story on the latest for the Australian tomorrow, in the Weekend Australian. So look forward to reading that as well, and of course stay safe over there.